Yesterday, Mariners President of Baseball Operations, Jerry Dipoto, had his first official media availability since the one immediately following the end of the regular season. In this video, we're going to get into Jerry's entire presser, hear exactly what he had to say on what the Mariners have done so far this offseason, and of course, I'll share my input throughout. So this first clip is when he was asked about the Mariners offseason as a whole and his thoughts.
Well, from the start, when we met, we all met at season's end, talked about I think the positive trend that developed over the season's final 6 weeks, the way we saw our team come together. I think especially notable was the uptick we saw in our offense, and the group generally played well together. And one of our points going into this offseason, and I know I made it sitting in the dugout in the final series there, was that we didn't anticipate a great deal of movement around the team. And, as we are now about a week away from headed to spring training, I'd say that probably played out to be spot on, much to, I think, the dismay of a few. But we have a good team. And, we went into the offseason with what we thought were needs at first base, second base, third base. And, I'd mentioned before, we viewed first base as a potential, for a platoon with Luke Raley playing, the bigger role, and, perhaps looking there for someone who could support him from the right side on what I would call, the short end of a platoon at first base, or do something more permanent if the opportunity presented itself. The other was second base, third base. We felt like we could fill one of those spots internally, and the other spot was likely going to be external. At that point, we didn't pick up the option on Jorge Polanco, and we made the choice to non-tender Josh Rojas, meaning that we would no longer had full capability of covering that spot internally. And, a combination of Dylan Moore and Ryan Bliss and what we feel is a bright future for Cole Young, Leo Rivas really presented us with some flexibility there. So that's the backdrop, and here we are. We went out and we added that what we think is a real veteran presence in our clubhouse, quiet pro, and a guy like Donovan Solano, who's been excellent against left-hand pitching and pretty good against the righties as well. He can play a number of different positions, but in recent years, it's been more first base, third base, and not necessarily in that order. And we felt like, the addition of Donovan really gave us a stabilizer. It allowed us to have a potential answer at one or two positions, or it allowed us the ability to platoon at either. And that came on the heels of falling short on a free agent or two, and not really liking where the trade market was taking us. And then here in recent weeks, we have had a dialogue really throughout the offseason with Jorge Polanco, and we were satisfied with where he was from a health perspective. We were excited that he was optimistic about how he felt and about returning to the Mariners. Is he now knows our ballpark. He's familiar with our clubhouse. He knows our manager and staff. And, I thought it was a real positive that he chose to be here. So that's how we chose to fill these holes. We're still open if the opportunity to add exists out there. But we feel like it's a good team. And if this is our team going into spring training or opening day, we're pretty excited by it.
From that first clip, he recognized that heading into the offseason, they really had three holes to fill this offseason: first base, second base, and third base. The plan heading into the offseason was that Luke Raley was going to fill some sort of platoon at first base, and he mentioned that Luke Raley will be getting the bigger share of the platoon. I guess part of that is because there's more right-handed pitchers compared to left-handed pitchers, and Luke Raley would be batting against righties. And he also mentioned that they were open to potential permanent options at first base if that opportunity presented itself. There was a solid permanent option at first base available. Christian Walker ended up going to the Astros, a 3-year, $60 million deal, just $20 million per year to secure one of, if not the best first baseman available. He then mentioned that the plans to fill the second base and third base holes after declining Jorge Polanco's option was to fill one internally, one externally. Dylan Moore is coming off of a Gold Glove season as a utility man. You got Ryan Bliss right there that is coming up. Cole Young is expected at some point in the season. There's also Leo Rivas at second base. But after they decided to non-tender Josh Rojas a contract at third base, they now had to fill that spot externally. He mentioned that Donovan Solano is somewhat of a stabilizer in their infield. He could play first base or third base. And he said that this move was on the heels of missing out on a free agent or two. We know that Carlos Santana decided to go to Cleveland instead of taking the Mariners' higher offer to play first base for the Mariners. I'm curious if Christian Walker was also a free agent that they were pursuing. And the Solano move came after they weren't quite liking what they were seeing in the trade market. Another trade target and Josh Naylor was traded to the Diamondbacks. He did mention that they are still open to adding to the roster if needed. We'll see if Yohan Moncada is still an option here, but likely this is what their spring training roster will look like. Now the second clip is after Ryan Divish asked Dipoto about Jorge Polanco's health and if he's playing third base due to his range and his health with his knee.
To answer the question, if you'll get the chance, I'm sure, to speak to Polo, but he looks great. Physically, he looks great. We had a chance to watch his workouts on video, and we had some opportunity to visit live. Ulysses Cabrera, who represents Jorge, also has a few of our other players, most notably Julio. We stayed in touch throughout the offseason. Obviously, our medical team was front and center in the original scheduling of the surgery, and then visiting with him throughout his rehab, up to and including when we opted not to pick up the option. And they've stayed in contact with him through the offseason. He looks more explosive. I think the most obvious piece of information is just how much easier it is for him to stop his momentum when he's moving forward, when he has that burst or even side to side. The simple drills, baseball drills that towards season's end last year did look painful for Jorge. They no longer look that way. And he says he feels great. I believe him. It looks that way visually. And, we think third base it's the better fit for our roster. We just feel like Dylan Moore's best defensive position is second base. Cole Young, we feel like, has incredible, defensive skills. He is naturally a shortstop who's played a lot of second base coming through development and feels better suited to playing in the middle when his time comes. And we could say the same of Ryan Bliss. Ryan has been a middle infielder throughout. He's more comfortable in the middle of the field and more explosive. And we felt like the shorter range position at third base really had a chance to just take a lot of the pressure off of Jorge. That he, to his credit, he kept posting. He kept posting when his knee did not feel right, and obviously it was continuing to aggravate him throughout the year. And he showed up and he gave us a chance by pitching in where he could, and now we get the benefit of a healthy version of Jorge in 2025, and we'll see where it takes us.
Jerry mentioned that the Mariners were in contact with Polanco and his camp all throughout the offseason, including the surgery in October after they declined his club option. They've now been able to watch him work out on video and in person. He's able to do full baseball activities, and essentially they're putting him at third base, one, for the range, but two, that is the Mariners' current need. He mentioned that Dylan Moore's best position is at second base. He also mentioned Cole Young ideally is playing second base when he comes up. You got Ryan Bliss at second as well. Myself personally, I was in the camp of picking up Polanco's club option for $12 million. They declined it, of course. And the contract that they agreed upon now is for 1 year, $7.75 million is guaranteed. If he meets all of his performance incentives for the 2025 season, he can make a max of $11.25 million. And he can also vest a player option for the 2026 season if he gets at least 450 plate appearances in 2025. I am a big fan of Polanco coming back. Before he joined the Mariners, he had a .268 batting average essentially from both sides of the plate. Each of his prior 3 seasons, he had at least 117 weighted runs created plus, so his bat was at least 17% above the league average. This last season, he was at a 92, but again, that was because he was injured. If we get a healthy Jorge Polanco, that is a big addition. In this next clip, Jerry is asked about the trade market and how that was panning out.
Yeah, we just, we went into it, again, as we discussed at season's end, we really didn't want to move any of our starting pitching. And, that was where people were hitting us, was in the starting rotation. And we were just steadfast in our commitment to hold on to the pitching to the extent that we felt like we could improve, our situation, and without moving our pitching, we wanted to explore every avenue. And, we did have some conversation around our pitchers. particularly when there were so many phone calls coming in right around the time of the winter meetings. But it was always our desire to get to opening day with the five, and that starting five's in place, and good health permitting, five starting pitchers, and we're gonna ride them like we always have.
As you can imagine, the Mariners were getting hit up quite often about their starting rotation, if any of those guys would be available. Likely the biggest win of the offseason is that they did not trade any of those guys, and they are heading into another season with the best starting rotation the Mariners franchise has ever seen. Jerry was then asked more about the offense and where exactly the production is expected to come from. Is it from a bounce back with Mitch Garver and Mitch Haniger? It was also pointed out in this question that the Mariners had the most strikeouts in all of baseball last season. They were second worst in batting average with a 224 team batting average. And last season, the Mariners had the second most strikeouts by a team in a single season in MLB history. They were just 29 shy of the 2023 Minnesota Twins. And the Mariners hold 3 of the top 9 slots in MLB history in total team strikeouts in a season. Their 2019 season ranks 9th all time. Their 2023 season ranks 4th all time. And then last season, the 2024 season, ranks 2nd all time in team strikeouts.
I think there is the reality of our offense, and then the perception of our offense. And our offense, we play in a tough ballpark to hit in. Our offense has generally been above average based on advanced metrics, WRC plus, things like that, for a number of years now. The last 3 years, we've actually had a very stable offense, particularly good on the road. I think one of the top 10 in MLB when we're on the road. And at home, we play in a tough run scoring environment that really benefits our pitching staff, and our players, position players, have been asked to find ways. And we've generally done that. We've turned it into one of the best home records in the league. So, we try not to think too much about how to reconstruct a team for our ballpark. It's working, the way it is. We just have to figure out how to make it work better. And, our team in general, we strike out more at home than on the road. I think that's also true of our opponents. And what we have done is we've built a team of players that on their own, they're very good. And the attrition or potential for players to bounce back from down years, we had a few guys last year who came out and didn't have their best season or got off to slow starts. We added Victor Robles in midseason. We added Randy Arozarena at the trade deadline. We get a full season from what we hope is a resurgent J.P. Crawford, and we get perhaps the second half of Julio rather than the first, and that goes a long way. You add that to some of the players we had who had breakout seasons like Luke Raley, excellent seasons like Cal Raleigh. We have a good offensive team, and we didn't feel like we needed to do a whole lot but to find ways to support the group that we had. And, I know the off season has been long and seemingly slow. We feel, and I said this at season's end, we do feel like we made a lot of progress last year. And, the additions of Arozarena, Robles, Solano, and a healthy Jorge Polanco with what we think will be bounce back seasons from a couple of guys who didn't have their best years stand to be positives for us.
He talks about with the Mariners offense, there's the reality of what the team is doing versus the perception. The perception is certainly not good. The perception certainly focuses more on the negative and the strikeouts and the batting average. But he stated that the Mariners offense has been one of the better teams via weighted runs created plus throughout the past 3 seasons, and he's not wrong. Starting with the 2022 season, the Mariners were 9th overall in weighted runs created plus. 2023, they were 6th. Last season, they were 12th. And then going into home versus away, in 2022, home, they were ranked 10th. Away, they were ranked 7th. 2023, they were ranked 10th at home, 6th at away. And then in 2024, they were 11th in weighted runs created plus at home and 13th away. So while some of the top line offensive numbers certainly look like the Mariners are one of the worst offenses in baseball via weighted runs created plus, they certainly are in the top half and even closer to the top 10. The next question is from Shannon Dreyer on where he views the Mariners at currently compared to the rest of the AL West.
We feel like we're right in the mix. We just talked about the offense and what we think is likely to be the case, or how that will play out for us. We look at our division. I think Oakland got better. There's no question they got better. The Angels very early in the offseason made a flurry of moves, and they've got some new faces. Houston's going to look different than they've looked in recent years, at least as we sit here today. And the Rangers reconstructed a bullpen and changed some faces on the pitching staff in general. We feel like we're right in the mix. I think the early projection systems feel like we're right in the mix. We feel like we're right in the mix, and a real positive for us is the expected healthy returns of Gregory Santos and Matt Brash. It's maybe the thing that got us most in the last 2 months of last season was a bullpen that got tired, and it got the leverage innings. Really, we pushed really hard on guys like Andres Munoz and Voter and Trent Thornton early, and they were all pitching a lot and in very high leverage all the time. And I think having guys like Santos, Brash, and more time from Troy Taylor give us a lot of opportunity to improve in that area as well.
He says the Mariners will be right there in the mix, and I completely agree. The A's have certainly gotten better, and they likely will be a contender before you know it. I think the Angels will finish last, and then the top three all have a solid shot at the playoffs. Houston is going to look quite a bit different, adding Christian Walker, shipping off Kyle Tucker. Justin Verlander is now a Giant. The Rangers are returning a majority of the roster. They added some guys as well. And looking at the early projections, as he mentioned, the Mariners currently have a 57.1% chance of making the playoffs. They are projected for 85.8 wins, 76.2 losses, a 53% winning percentage. The Houston Astros are currently projected to get 86.9 wins, a 63.1% chance at the playoffs. And as of today, the Rangers are projected to get 89 wins, take first place in the AL West with a 75.8% chance at the playoffs. He was then asked about the state of Andres Munoz, his prior season, and what he expects for next year.
He was pretty awesome, made the All-Star team. His first half was dynamic. Second half, he got a little pooped. We asked him to throw a lot of those 1+ coming in the eighth. He was faced with a lot of inherited runners in the eighth inning and really made him walk a thin line. And I think that was largely a result of a bullpen that got thinned out very quickly in spring training when we lost Munoz, or when we lost Santos and Brash. So, it's add that to what was, a significantly different outcome in the early going last year for Gabe Spire, and our bullpen just looked different. But, we feel pretty confident in the way we construct the bullpen and our group in general. Mooney's healthy. I believe he's already been up to 100 in his bullpen sessions, which is kind of what he does. And we'll see him next week, I'm sure, on the mounds with the others down in Peoria.
Brian Divish then followed up by asking about the health status of the rest of the roster.
For Brash, our expectation, Matt's had a great rehab. Fingers crossed. He's down in Peoria already. He has really not had a roadblock to date. Our current expectation is that he's ready to go when we start rolling in spring training, and our present timeline is that we should get him back somewhere around the third week of April, which is pretty exciting. And obviously that's tentative. It could change, and obviously it wouldn't be at all shocking if he did experience some setback as he starts to ramp up into game mode. But we haven't seen that yet, and I think Matt's very encouraged with how he feels and the like. Similarly, Gregory Santos, who missed a lot of time last year, he's already down in spring training, throwing his bullpens at 100% effort, and he looks good to go from day one, which is equally as exciting. We are going to be without Troy Taylor for a little bit at the start of spring training. He's had a bit of a lat strain in his off-season workouts that popped up about a week ago. And we're going to take it easy on him with the throwing when we get started. So he's more TBD, and we would expect that there is at least some potential that he's going to have to start the season down in Arizona rather than with the club as he ramps into the throwing speed.
Having a fully healthy three-headed monster at the back end of your bullpen is going to be massive, with Gregory Santos and Matt Brash both expected back. He mentioned that Gregory Santos should be ready for opening day and that Matt Brash should be ready to go around the third week of April. And he did also mention that Troy Taylor suffered a lat strain this offseason and he'll be shut down for a little bit. There was also a follow-up question about Luis Castillo specifically, how he dealt with the trade talks.
I guess in reverse, he's a pro. Yes is the answer. We did once his name leaked as having been discussed in trade talks, we did connect with Louis. Obviously his agent, Rafa, and not shockingly, he was a pro about the whole thing. And I think the piece that really didn't get discussed a lot publicly, at least in what I saw, is, he has a full no trade protection for, at least for this year. And anything that we did was going to be communicated through Luis. So it's not like we were trying to hide the fact that his name had come up. And it did, and not shockingly, we had inquiries on all 5 of our starting pitchers, and dozens of prospects along the way. But obviously we opted not to go that route. We had more than a few deals that made you scratch your head and say, hey, what do you think, guys? But by and large, we just feel like that the value of what our pitching staff as a whole provides us, there's a reason why we're so good pitching at home. And because the guys attack the strike zone, they're really good at what they do. They buy into our programs. And I think the key to what I said earlier, we're a good home team. We're one of the best home teams in the American League. And, why disrupt that? And more like I had addressed in, October when I met with the group at the end of the season, was we're about our pitching. We're going to lean into it. And, this is who we are. But, it would be foolish of us not to at least listen when teams call. And, it's not like we just send it to voicemail. So, obviously we chose to hold on to Louis and the other 4 starting pitchers. And as we expected when the offseason began, pretty quiet offseason. And I think that's reflective of a team that didn't have a whole lot of holes to fill. And, we feel great about our farm system. We feel great about the stability in our team. And we feel like our offense doesn't get enough credit for the things that they do well. And Dan and Edgar, once they jumped on board in August, I think there was a different vibe around our team. And, with few exceptions, I think just about anything that we could hope to have achieved over the last, let's call it 6 weeks of the season, from uptick in play on the field to improved offense to, just to winning games. We were as good as anybody in the league for that time. We're hoping that we can take that and ride that momentum into 2025.
Obviously, they had more holes to fill than he led on, or at least they're filling those holes in ways that they shouldn't if they're really trying to contend. Obviously, if they're really trying to contend, ownership would greenlight spending. However, on the positive side, the Mariners in 2025 will have one of the best rotations in baseball, still the best rotation in franchise history. They'll likely have one of the best back ends of the bullpen in baseball in Matt Brash, Gregory Santos, and Andres Munoz. I do think the Mariners offense will take a big step up this year with Edgar Martinez being the leading voice in that hitting room, with Kevin Seitzer and Bobby Magallanes as the hitting coach and assistant hitting coach, moving away from the heavy analytics in the hitting room to more of the basic old school baseball, old school approach. And at the same time that the Mariners will be contending for the AL West and for the playoffs, they also have one of, if not the best farm systems in all of baseball. While there is oftentimes a ton of negativity online within the Mariners community about this team, I would encourage you to try to stay optimistic as much as you can. Spring training is right around the corner. There's nothing like baseball in Seattle during the summer. But regardless, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this presser, the Mariners offseason. And for more content like this, make sure to like and subscribe to the Couch GM. Follow me across social medias, and we'll see you in the next one.